Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. My guest today is Member of Parliament Michael Cooper, and when we come back, we have some questions to ask him. First of all, about an Employment Minister named Randy Boissannualt.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
Please like the station, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't. And if YouTube has unsubscribed you, please subscribe again. Well, Edmonton MP Michael Cooper, you've been doing a tremendous job in the House raising the issue of the Employment Minister, Randy Boissannualt, who is a nearby member of Parliament from you. He's an Edmonton MP, and you're, of course, you're Strathcona. And
St. Albert.
Yes, St. Albert. What was I thinking? But it's from what I read today, it seems like the Ethics Committee has been successful in getting Randy Boissannualt to appear before the committee. And last week, a global news story outlined how Mr. Boissonnault had very close links to a lobbyist involving $110 million in federal grants. And that there's personal protective equipment company that Boissonnault is associated with was awarded $8.2 million provincial and municipal contracts. Could you walk us through briefly what are the potential charges here? I don't mean legal, but what do you think happened here? This was a member of Parliament, a cabinet minister with links to a lobbying firm, and it appears that something was not right in his activities. In your opinion, what transpired here?
Well, Mr. Boissonnault has a lot to answer for. The heart of the issue is that Mr. Boissonnault hid from the Ethics Commissioner the fact that his business partner was lobbying the government, including his department. He was the junior Minister of Finance, and his business partner was lobbying that department, securing $110 million in government contracts, all the while paying Boissonnault. And so this is a conflict of interest, or perhaps something worse. And up until now, Mr. Boissonnault has refused to answer basic questions. Instead, he has deflected, and in the House, Steve McKinnon, the government House leader, has fielded non-answers on his behalf.
As I've noticed, every time there's a question directed to Randy Boissannualt, Steve McKinnon rises and answers on his behalf. Do you think this is potentially another major scandal for the government?
It seems to me that there was a violation, at the very least, of the Conflict of Interest Act, unless Mr. Boissonnault can provide a better explanation than he has, and he has really provided no explanation. There's a lot of smoke, and where there is smoke, there often is fire. And that's why it's important that Mr. Boissonnault come before the Ethics Commissioner for a reasonable period of time. I don't know how long he's going to be appearing before a committee, but there are a lot of questions that, as I say, he has to answer, but he hasn't. And I should also note that we have sent a letter, MP Barrett, as the shadow minister responsible for ethics, to the Ethics Commissioner, calling for the Ethics Commissioner to launch an investigation.
I believe Boissonnault has claimed that any monies exchanged, any checks he received were for services rendered long before he entered the House or became a cabinet minister. It seems fairly unlikely to most reasonable people. Does that strike you as being entirely truthful?
Well, one of the other things that Mr. Boissonnault hasn't explained is that he has received monies from Navis Group, which is the lobbying firm of his business partner. Mr. Boissonnault's company, his firm, was something called Xenix Venture Company, or Xenix. And the projects that he claims that he had accounts receivable in respect of were from Xenix. So it begs the question, why is he being paid by Navis Group?
Well, that's a very good question. So do you expect to get some answers from Boissonnault when he appears before the ethics committee?
Well, if his performance this week is at the Human Resources Committee, when I and Michael Barrett asked questions, is any indication, I don't expect he's going to be forthcoming, but we're going to press him. He has a lot to answer for, and if he has nothing to hide, if everything is truly above board, as he claims, then he should be very willing to come forward and finally answer questions.
It's not the most popular of MPs with, I would say, ordinary Canadians. He's highly partisan, seems incapable of working with the opposition in any way. Do you think his seat is in danger in the next federal election?
There's no question his seat is in danger. Justin Trudeau is extremely unpopular, and Randy Boissannualt has done the bidding of Justin Trudeau. He's represented Ottawa, not Edmonton in Ottawa.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I wanted to touch on another matter very close to your heart because you were very involved in the China election interference. I sat through much of the hearings and I was flabbergasted, to be quite frank at times, to see the bifurcation between what Justin Trudeau remembers, what Justin Trudeau said he saw, what Justin Trudeau said he read, and what the CSIS director had to report. In fact, they brought the CSIS director back to say, Justin Trudeau virtually contradicted everything you said. Are you sure you meant what you said? And he repeated what he had said. So your thoughts on that? Are we going to see some justice out of this whole procedure?
Well, Madam Justice Hogue is going to, as part of her second report, address gaps and issues with respect to credibility because of the contradictory evidence of, on the one hand, of Justin Trudeau's top advisors, including Jeremy Broadhurst, Katie Telford, his chief of staff, and Justin Trudeau himself, versus, for instance, what the director of CSIS, David Vinault, said at the public inquiry. And quite frankly, between the CSIS director, David Vinault, and Katie Telford, Jeremy Broadhurst, and Justin Trudeau, who would I trust? I would trust David Vinault any day over those three. So that is going to be an important part of the work that Madam Justice Hogue is going to be doing. And I've got to say that someone is lying, and it's either Katie Telford or Justin Trudeau. Because when Katie Telford came before the Procedure and House Affairs Committee last year, she said that the Prime Minister is briefed regularly and that the Prime Minister reads everything that is put on his desk. When Justin Trudeau appeared at the public inquiry, he said, in essence, he reads nothing. He knows nothing. He relies on others. And so what Ms. Telford said versus what Justin Trudeau said simply don't add up. Someone didn't tell the truth. It's either Justin Trudeau who is a liar or Katie Telford? Or both, probably.
As Justin Trudeau has said in very informal interviews that he really doesn't like to read briefing notes, documents. He prefers science fiction books, superhero stories. So it's not to me in any way hard to believe that he didn't read any of this, but clearly he was told. The CSIS director made it clear that this was an issue that he brought up on a regular basis. So know. I don't know how Trudeau can possibly run away from this, but he'll try. Of course, he always does. But
he will try. But we know that the Prime Minister was briefed repeatedly by CSIS, by the security and intelligence establishment about Beijing's interference in our elections, and he turned a blind eye to that. He attempted to cover, he obfuscated and downplayed the significance of Beijing's interference. And what is worse is that in some instances, Justin Trudeau made decisions that put his interests, his electoral interests, ahead of national security and countering Beijing's interference in our democracy. And don't take my word for it. Take the findings of Madam Justice Hogue. For instance, in the Don Valley North Liberal nomination, Madam Justice Hogue noted or concluded that Justin Trudeau, who had been informed of the contents of a CSIS briefing that Beijing interfered in that nomination to help Han Dong secure the nomination, when he was faced with that information that one of his candidates was assisted by Beijing, Justin Trudeau, instead of at the very least seeking further information, let alone doing what I think would have been the right thing to do, which would have been to remove him altogether as a candidate, instead made the decision to do nothing and allow Mr. Dong to stand in the 2019 election as the Liberal candidate for Don Valley North. And Madam Justice Hogue said that Justin Trudeau made that decision based upon considerations of political consequences. In other words, Justin Trudeau put his interests and the electoral interests of the Liberal Party of Canada ahead of national security. And as a result, as Madam Justice Hogue concluded, there were consequences, electoral consequences of that decision, namely that someone that Beijing thought would advance their interests in Ottawa was elected to the House of Commons. Justin Trudeau's actions in the Don Valley North nomination, having been informed about Beijing's interference, demonstrate his complete unfitness for the office that he holds as Prime Minister.
Well, I'm not going to put any words in your mouth on this issue. I'm strictly speaking from my own belief in this, but I think eventually you guys who are digging up this information on the Chinese election interference are going to find a connection between that and what happened at the biolab in Winnipeg. I believe there's a very definite connection there, and I think it needs to be brought out. But there's not enough evidence right now to do so. But that's something I'm working on in my spare time, because I believe there's a definite connection in terms of quid pro quo.
Well, I
I want to turn briefly.
One commonality,
Go ahead.
one connection, David, if I may, is that it is both instances of Beijing's interference in our democracy and what happened at the Winnipeg lab demonstrate that we have a government under Justin Trudeau that doesn't take the threat of Beijing seriously, hasn't acted on intelligence, hasn't taken measures to counter Beijing's interference. And Justin Trudeau bears significant responsibility because it's the culture, the national security culture of a government starts at the top. It starts with the Prime Minister.
And at the very least, I think we can say this was an abdication of responsibility of national security, and potentially, perhaps even worse. But we will see. I want to turn now briefly to last week in the House of Commons. Speaker Greg Fergus removed your leader, Conservative Party of Canada, and official opposition leader Pierre Poilevre from question period because he used two words. He called the Prime Minister a wacko, which I think a lot of Canadians would say, yeah, what's the issue here? And an extremist. And I don't think even Trudeau could argue with that. His policies are extreme. And in fact, the following morning, I think one of the most moderate NDP leaders that ever served, Tom Mulcair, said on a scale of 1 to 10, wacko is about a 2.5. And the speaker should step down because he has done a completely irresponsible thing. What were your thoughts when the speaker removed Mr. Poilievre from the House of Commons? Do you think this was an affront to basic democracy in Canada?
I was outraged when it happened, and upon further reflection, following what happened to Mr. Poilievre, I strongly believe that it didn't happen in the moment in terms of the speaker making the call right then and there, clearly the wrong call. I believe that it was planned before Pierre Poilievre even stood in the House of Commons. In the lead up to question period, the Liberals were feeling the heat about their, frankly, wacko decriminalization of hard drugs policy in British Columbia that has led to a record 2,500 overdose deaths in the past year, a record number. And the speaker, and so Justin Trudeau was going to have to get up and answer questions. He was going to have to, frankly, get up and try to defend the indefensible. And the Prime Minister knew that, and the Speaker knew that. And the Speaker came into the House with a piece of paper, and it was that piece of paper that he picked up and read when he named Pierre Poilievre and removed him from the House for essentially nothing. Even after Pierre Poilievre withdrew. And so I am convinced that the Speaker was planning to remove Pierre Poilievre if he thought he had the opportunity to do so. And he, in a very clumsy way, latched on to the word wacko, which is a word that has been used by many members of Parliament across all party lines over many, many years without any consequence. And now all of a sudden, Pierre Poilievre was removed from the House of Commons, the leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition, being thrown out of the House, silenced from being able to stand in his place in the House of Commons to hold this government to account for their wacko policies. And so, yes, it was an affront to democracy, but it is par for the course with Justin Trudeau and his supporters, because Justin Trudeau has gone to all lengths possible to silence his critics. This is a prime minister that has frozen the bank accounts of law-abiding Canadians who disagree with him, who crushed peaceful demonstrators in Ottawa when he illegally invoked the Emergencies Act. And last week, we saw the Prime Minister, through his speaker, his partisan speaker, sink to another low by ejecting the leader of the opposition from the House of Commons for using what amounts to perfectly parliamentary and, in this instance, very accurate language of characterizing the Prime Minister and his hard drug policies.
So I had to laugh today during question period where Chrystia Freeland, as the acting prime minister, the deputy prime minister, has the gall to say that Pierre Poilievre is offering an a la carte charter of rights. And this is the woman who froze bank accounts of people who didn't agree with her narrative on COVID mandates. But going back to the speaker, so many people have concurred with observations I made that day. Here you have a speaker who's got the House of Commons standing orders right next to him, as you pointed out. He's got a yellow sticky note right on number 11. He's clearly prepared to kick this man out. I think he got his orders from Justin Trudeau that day to get rid of him. But how do you feel after, I would say, through relentless questioning, forcing Justin Trudeau in a way to finally say, okay, we're going to call off this pilot project in British Columbia. We're going to end the decriminalization of public use of noxious hard drugs. Do you take some credit for that? Because he was giving you non-answers for a week. You were peppering him with questions. What are you going to do about it? When is it going to happen? Are you going to recriminalize hard drugs in BC? You got no answers. And finally, on Tuesday, he says, "Hey, guess what? We agreed to it yesterday on Monday." Do you, as a party, take some credit for getting some action out of this indolent government?
Well, there's no question that the pressure that Conservative MPs, particularly British Columbia Conservative MPs, put on the Liberals and the NDP, who are the enablers of this government, that did have an impact. And it's public pressure as well, because it's proven to be an absolute disaster, resulting in thousands of deaths, not to mention really serious problems in communities right across British Columbia, including negatively impacting public safety. So I think there is a widespread recognition that this whole policy is wacko. It's been a disaster. But even though the Liberals have finally backed down, after the NDP government in British Columbia even said, we need you to change federal policy, that Justin Trudeau has continually refused to answer whether his government will turn down requests from radical mayors like the mayor of Toronto and her far left dominated city council that wants to bring to Toronto what Justin Trudeau and the NDP brought to British Columbia, leaving death and wreckage, human wreckage, behind. And I think it's telling, because it underscores the fact that Justin Trudeau hasn't given up to this idea. He hasn't acknowledged that it has been a complete failure. If he did that, he would say unequivocally that we're not going to go ahead with any sort of project in Toronto or Montreal or other municipalities across Canada. He hasn't done that, nor has his minister, Yara Sachs.
No, well, who is also a national disgrace with some of the answers she's given. Today, she's essentially saying these addicts need help, but let's not talk about mandatory treatment. But bravo for the hard work you've done on this file, all of you who've done on this file. I'm from British Columbia. I still consider it home. I don't recognize the province anymore. And I think it's because of the insane policies of a provincial government, a socialist provincial government that has been facilitated and assisted by Justin Trudeau's crazy liberal government. So I'll leave that at there. My final question. I think the worst piece of legislation Justin Trudeau has before this country is the Online Harms Act. And I'm hoping we're going to hear a lot more from the Conservative official opposition on this, because if this thing goes through, it's going to mean house arrest for thought crimes. And as Elon Musk just discovered this week, it's going to be retroactive. And I've been writing since the dawn of the internet. I've got at least 15 years of material out there that I'm now going to have to be looking at that could be adjudged and assessed as hate speech. And of course, this is all meant to chill critics of Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government. Does the Conservative Party of Canada intend to vociferously fight the Online Harms Act?
Absolutely. And for this piece of legislation is all about control by Justin Trudeau to try to shut down, silence, and even criminalize those who disagree with him. And it demonstrates that Justin Trudeau, you want to talk about someone who has authoritarian impulses, who implements authoritarian policies, it's Justin Trudeau. And it's why we're going to fight this latest online censorship legislation that the Liberals have introduced. And it's why the sooner that this government finally has the guts, or the Prime Minister has the guts, to call an election so that Canadians can throw these guys out, the better.
Yes, I hope we can stop this bill so it doesn't have to be retracted, rescinded in a Conservative government, because I would like to see this never see the light of day. But keep up the good fight, Michael. And thank you for joining me today. And thank you for all the good work you do for freedom and for Canadians. And it is appreciated.
Well, thank you very, very much, David. It was great to be with you.
And we will see you.